and welcome. Today I'm going to start off with harvesting. So under here I've got some cabbages and cauliflowers that have been there since last October, and I put the cover over them and I've kind of just left them there to do their own thing. I've planted some shallots in amongst there, and I'm hoping to get my collies and cabbages out and get the celeriac in, because that's what's going to grow between the shallots. So let's see what's going on underneath here. Did you just see a butterfly come out? I'm not sure if I saw a butterfly. Right. Well, I've got one cabbage here. Come on in for a closer look. Here's the cabbage I just said was looking good. And then there's another one back there that looks okay, although I think I should have harvested that sooner. This cabbage I think has bolted. This one definitely has bolted. And then with these cauliflowers, they seem to be covering their heart. So with this one, I'm just gonna use my, there's something there. So I've had a look in here and there are some cauliflowers heartening up, which is great, because anyone who's been following me for a long time will know that cauliflowers are like my nemesis. Well, they're one of my nemesis. I've got a few nemesis actually. But I'll get the cabbages out now, and then I shall plant this with some celeriac where there's spaces, and I'll take out all these old leaves as well and just give everything a little bit of a trim. They're not looking too bad plants. Normally they're a bit bigger by now, but normally they're in the ground by now. So let's get harvesting and planting. The first one was your picture perfect one. The second one was a bit weird. And the third one, well, it kind of tried to heart up, but didn't get very large. Okay, here's the 8th celeriac in, the very large cauliflower. Left alone, I've just taken off the outside bits, and then the other row of celeriac. And once this cauliflower has gone in the middle, I'll plant the rest of the celeriac in there. But I think my shallots are suffering as well. I don't think they're getting enough light. So I don't think we'll be having a very good harvest of shallots this year, but that's how it goes, isn't it? So that's my celeriac all planted up. Well, not all. I've still got the 8 to go in the middle where the cauliflowers are, but I'll do that another day once I've harvested those cauliflowers. I thought they would have been done by now, but obviously not. And that's a good harvest of cabbage. So let's go and see what else I can get from around the garden. Just up from the cabbages, we've got some broad beans. So let's go and have a look at the broad beans. They're down here. So I reckon we've got a good amount to harvest on here. They are laden. So let's get on with that. Well, that's my broad beans picked. There are still some left on the plant, but there's not many. I've just left the smaller ones to see if they grow. But what we've got now will be most of our harvest for this year. But I'm pleased with what we've got. It's a good size amount of beans. So yeah, let's go and get the radishes and the lettuce now. just taking a few of the outer leaves and I'll leave the rest to grow on to heart up. Not to heart up, I'll take them as and when I need leaves. So the little gem next door, I'll leave to heart up, but these I won't. These are the gem lettuces that I was talking about. I'm going to leave them so they will heart up. But my pak choi that's in here is bolted, so we'll take that out and I'll pop some beetroot in its place. I did wonder about this pak choi. It does normally bolt in the summer, but I thought, well, I'd grown it, so I'll give it a try. But it's always better to have a backup, which in this case is this beetroot. I've chosen beetroot because the cabbages that are in here usually take between 4 to 6 months to be ready, and I thought, well, the beetroot is roughly along the same timeline, so I won't be you know, have half the bed in use for one thing and then not quite sure what to put in the other half of the bed. This one is bolt hardy, this beetroot. The one in the bed next door is multi-coloured ones, so all different kinds of variety. And I think we'll pop a couple of radishes in like we did with the other beetroot bed as well. I don't know if you can see that cabbage on there, just about, can't you? It's not looking very good. Well, I mean, by that I mean it's not growing very well. But it is a purple one, and the rest I think are greyhound, so how that purple one got in there, I don't know. But never mind. Ooh. Oh, that's a dried worm. I thought that was a hook. Right, poor worm. Just cover him over. It looks like it's going to rain today, but it's always better to water things in just in case. Sometimes you've got to hunt for them. So I have decided to give this weird looking cabbage to the chickens because they love that. That's right, girls, eat the greens, eat the greens. And here is the harvest for this week. So we've got the radishes and the lettuce, strawberries, the 2 cabbages, and a load of broad beans. So really happy with them. Right, I really want to get on with planting some plants in the ground because I am fed up of seeing all these blank spaces when I look out into the garden. So let's get some of these seedlings into the ground. They are a little bit smaller than I normally like to plant out, but that's just the year we've had. So I figure they've got to go into the ground. If I've got some spares, I'll pot them on, and if the ones I've put in the ground get eaten, then I can put the spares in. So come on, let's go and see what needs planting out and let's get it planted. So I start my mass plant out with some leeks. I'm just showing you the size of these leeks. These are multi-sown, so they are not as thick as if I grew them individually, but I do normally plant them out around about this size, so I'm pretty confident that they are large enough to go out. I'm just digging a hole, popping the leek in, and then covering it over. All the beds in this area were mulched in the winter or early spring, so I am not adding any nutrients. The bed should have enough from the compost mulch. I'm really hoping this year to get some leeks, because the last few years I just haven't managed it, and I really would like some leeks, as they are one of my favourite vegetables. Here are some of my seedlings that I wanted to show you, as I'm going to interplant some of these in the beds today. There are a mixture of brassicas, lettuce, spring onion, radish and beetroot. And as if it was planned, here I am planting out some of the lettuce seedlings in between the leeks. I'm hoping that the lettuce will have come and gone way before the leeks are ready, and then the leeks can just grow on by themselves. So here's one final look at what the leeks are like before I put the cover on. My next job is to cover over the leeks with some enviromesh, so I'm just popping some hoops in to make a temporary frame, and I also then decide to take the cardboard off the next bed, ready to plant it up, as I thought I could cover both beds with the bit of enviromesh that I have. But when I took the cardboard up, I noticed that the bed had so many slugs and snails in it that I was a bit hesitant to plant into it. So I'm putting these pots here as place markers for my sprouts, as they haven't grown very big, and I wanted to leave them grow on a bit in the greenhouse. And you can see I've just picked up a load of snails from that ground, and again I'm finding them the more and more I do. And I was going to put the seedlings around the sprouts because I felt like they could have gone in place, but I've decided against it now. So I'm putting the seedlings away and I'm clearing up the pots, and what I'll do is I'll leave this area for a week or so the slugs and snails can vacate this area, and then when I plant the sprouts out, hopefully they won't get munched on. So it's just covering the last of those leeks now with the enviromesh, and then that is this job done. And when I put the sprouts in, I can then just extend the enviromesh over that bed. I next move on to planting out my dwarf balotti beans, which are in this big pot. I don't normally plant them in a pot like this. I normally plant them in root trainers, just like this one here. But the beans I left in the greenhouse last year to dry, and I never got round to sorting them. So I ended up planting them into that big pot because they got wet, so they were no longer any good at being stored. So that is how I have ended up with this big pot of dwarf French balotti beans. But here I am now planting out the plug plants that the way I normally grow them, as it were. And these are nice and small and compact plants, whereas the ones in the pot, some of the plants have grown really leggy because they've just been competing so much for the light and the space. So that wasn't really the best way of growing them, but hopefully next year that won't happen. I've just planted all the 5 sensible dwarf plants from the plug plants, and now I'm trying to wrestle out all these beans. So I will be the first to admit I'm not doing this very gently, and in the end it does not work in my favour because a lot of the stems snap on these beans because they're just too long and leggy instead of being short and compact. So I end up throwing quite a few of these dwarf beans away, but we do end up with half a bed full. And in case you're wondering why we've only got half a bed, the other side of the bed has got sweet corn planted in it, but because I planted them as seeds, they haven't shown up yet. But I hope they will, as I really want some sweet corn. We are getting there, guys. We are getting there. Don't worry. I've now moved on to interplanting the tomatoes in the garlic bed, or in one of my garlic beds, I should say. I do try to leave enough gaps between my garlic bulbs when I plant them up in the autumn so that they can be interplanted during the spring, because I always find I have plants that I want to put in before the garlic is ready to come out. So if I pop them in now, it should give the tomatoes enough chance for their roots to get down, and then I can take the garlic out in a couple of weeks' time. The tomato plants I'm planting here are two different varieties. The one I'm doing now is Heinz. The 4 at the back are all Heinz, which is a bush variety. And the 2 at the front, which I've already planted, are Shirley. Shirley not. Yes, it is. It's Shirley. And I haven't grown them before, so I'm looking forward to seeing how they grow. We are now in the front garden, and I am interplanting some celeriac with spring onions. This celeriac was spares that I had left over, which I took to the plant sale and then brought home again because nobody wanted them. But I want them, so I'm planted them in here. Now, if anybody saw my previous video, well, not the very previous one, but one of my previous videos, you would have seen me planting pak choi in this bed. But unfortunately, it all just disappeared, like it does sometimes. It just goes overnight. So I was left with this blank space. So I thought, well, I'll pop my celeriac in and hopefully it will do well. I am really trying my best this year to have more flowers around the garden. So I am interplanting some nasturtiums in these half barrels in front of the house. I love nasturtiums as they taste lovely, they have a lovely splash of colour, and they can also lure pests away from other crops, and they are just an all-round good doer. So I try to get them in wherever I can. Good news, everybody, good news. We have now moved on to something other than planting out. Although this is just spreading compost on the bed, so not very exciting really, is it? This bed has only recently become clear, so I haven't got around to mulching it with compost yet. So I'm doing that now, and then I'm going to plant straight into it. The compost I'm using has been rotting down in my compost bin for at least 6 months, so it should be okay to use on this bed. I'm just removing this last overwintered kale plant. It's now gone to flower, and I'm just removing the very base of the plant with these loppers, and then I shall put it in the compost bin after shredding it. And here is the harvest we've got from it. So that's great. I'll just pop that in the freezer for when we want some kale. And finally, I'm putting out some more tomato plants. So I'm just working out the spacing between these tomato plants. I've got 6 to go out. 3 are outdoor girl. 1 is a burlesque, and the other 2 are Ace 55, which I haven't grown before. And then I'm getting a courgette plant. This is a practice one. If this survives, I'll put all my other squashes and pumpkins out. And you can see here that I have just built some teepees in the background for beans to climb up. I've got runner beans, which I'm going to plant, and I'm hoping to get hold of some Greek gigantes, which are like butter beans. So I'm hoping to grow them up the other teepee. And what I'm doing at the moment is making an A-frame for my gherkin and cucumber plants to climb up. So I'm just putting in the supports either side, and then I'll put a crossbar across the top, and then 2 crossbars lower down, which I'll tie some trellis net into. I'm going to drape this netting over the bar, and if you've never used this trellis netting before, it's really great. Somehow it doesn't get itself tangled up, and as long as you can find the one side of it, then it all sort of unravels itself, and it's really useful. I used it last year for my squash and cucumbers, and they absolutely loved growing up it. It's really useful as it just stores away really small and compact, so it's not in the way at all. I would recommend getting this if you're looking for netting to use on peas or beans or cucumbers or anything like that. And it comes in different sizes too, so it's really useful. With all the structures now up and in place, I'm rearranging where I'm going to put things. So I move the tomatoes closer to the teepee, and then I put the courgette at the front of the tomatoes, which then gives me room to put the beetroot down the middle, as beetroot doesn't need to be maintained very much throughout the season, so it can just grow on happily without me doing anything to it except maybe watering it every now and again. I am leaving myself a small walkway where I can harvest the cucumbers, and you can probably see it where it's been compacted down as I've been walking on it. I'm just adding some cross beams to the tomato supports that I've put in to make sure that they stay upright throughout the summer, and I'm just going to give it a customary wobble to see how sturdy it is, and I'm happy with that. I'm pleased to say I think it will hold up. Famous last words. I'm now tying in the tomato plants to the supports as it's quite windy at the moment, so they could do with a bit of extra support. And now it's time to plant the courgette. And around the courgette, I'm going to plant some radishes. Hopefully the radishes will have fully grown before the courgette expands over them and shades them out. These are the runner beans I'm going to grow. They are called Scarlet Emperor. I'm just dipping a hole about 5 centimetres deep and popping in a bean. Some beans have 2 beans per station and some have 1, because I only had 12 beans in total and I've got 8 posts. So I've done like an alternate 2-1, 2-1, 2-1, if that makes sense. I am determined to have spring onions wherever I can. So here I am interplanting them in the A-frame I've just made for the gherkins and cucumbers. We just love spring onions in our house, so I can never really plant enough, and they do make a great interplant. So that's what I'm doing here. And then I dither around for a bit, trying to decide whether my gherkins are big enough to plant out. They look big enough here, but when you actually see them from far away, they are quite small. So I am thinking, are they big enough? Aren't they big enough? Will they be frozen in the night time because the nighttime temperatures are still quite cold? And eventually I decide, yes, they are big enough, and I'm going to plant them in the ground. But I do have more gherkins lurking in my greenhouse. So if these don't survive, then I do have replacements for them. And if these do survive, then I can plant out the other ones. Just the tiny beetroot seeds left to plant in 2 rows down the middle of this bed. And I also pop the radish seedlings in wherever I find a space, because they won't take long to grow and then they'll be done. And that's this bed all planted up. All I can say is lovely job and take care everybody.